I want to talk to you a little bit about what I've done to sort of illustrate for you how I put into practice what I used to teach. There's the old saying that if you can't do, those who can't do, teach. And I wanted to prove that actually to be wrong. I did for a little bit. We won the election in 2004, and we won the primary nomination in 2008, only to be defeated by Lehman Brothers in 2008. Some of you will get that joke later. At any rate, I've been very fortunate, very blessed in my life. I feel like the turns that my life has taken have been really God-directed. So I also think that my faith plays an incredibly important, if not the main role in how I progressed down this path so far. But before I get started, everybody always wants to know, what's the deal with Sarah Palin? So I'm going to tell you the deal with Sarah Palin first to sort of trump that question for the end of the discussion. We can talk later about what's the deal with Sarah Palin. But she never said, "I can see Russia from my house." Okay? She never said that. That was Tina Fey. She's actually a bright person who was thrown into the cauldron of what is a presidential campaign. And for those of you unfamiliar with a presidential campaign, it is probably one of the more intense experiences that you can have. They are 20 to 24-hour days sometimes, and candidates are constantly under scrutiny, and it's a lot of pressure. And this was a person who had been a governor for about a year and a half, who had been the mayor of a very small town in Alaska, and beyond that did not have an incredible amount of political experience. And so she was put in a very difficult spot. Will she be the next president of the United States? I'm not one to predict. My guess is probably not. That doesn't mean she's not intelligent, but can she withstand the rigors of a presidential race? I would bet that we're going to find out whether or not that she can. But she was an interesting person to work with. She doesn't fit the caricature that's been described of her in the media. There are a good number of media who literally hate Sarah Palin. And she doesn't do much to help that. Are any of you familiar with Pete Weiner? He works at EPPC. He's got a piece out today, actually, talking about why Sarah Palin is ill-prepared to run for president. Part of that is her ability to sort of handle things that the media throws at her. So, and I'd recommend that piece to you. I'm fighting a little bit of a cold, so I apologize for my voice. But at any rate, I want to kind of share my experiences with you, talk with you a little bit about how they relate to at least my field of rhetoric that I still hold very dear over philosophy. And that's a joke with Dr. Snell. But at any rate, and through those experiences, tell you that the things that you're learning here in the classics, and if you're any students of rhetoric in here, anybody studying rhetorical theory at all? Anybody reading Aristotle at all? A little bit? Okay, well, good. Aristotle liked words, so you should read the Rhetoric in particular. But at any rate, to talk to you about the relevance of your education into practice once you leave here, and give you some advice about how to get yourself set up for success once you leave here. Let me show you my path as I got to politics. I actually don't need this. I've got a big mouth, so you can hear me. My path to politics went through a number of steps, some of which we've talked about. I was a speech major and a Greek minor when I was in school in my undergraduate days. I actually thought I was going to be a minister. And a friend of mine gave me kind of the most life-changing advice that I ever had. And that was not to go to seminary during the undergraduate stage, which means become a religion major, but rather major in a discipline that could prepare me to do the task of being a minister. And so he recommended a communications major, and I did that with a Greek minor to get me ready to go to seminary. But instead I found debate and rhetoric and really fell in love with the study of communication, and ended up in graduate school at Penn State University in communications. And that's where I sort of cut my teeth in getting interested in politics. I taught politics, political communication, and rhetorical theory throughout my career, but that's where I really got interested. And then I got into debate coaching through my undergraduate experience. I'd never debated in high school, but loved academic debate, started doing it, and then it became a way for me to pay my way through school as a graduate student. And then it was going to be the way I was going to pay my way through seminary, going back to Liberty to go to seminary and be the debate coach, but I ended up seeing what a ministry debate could be. And like I said, I was a teacher, worked with Bush Cheney, as I told you that story. And then I ended up with McCain Palin. After I was done with Bush Cheney, some other folks started asking me to do what I'd done for the president, and not to him, but for him. I started doing other political races, and a friend of mine that was with the Bush campaign recruited me to be on the McCain Palin campaign. And I don't know how many of you are familiar, really followed the 2008 election very closely, but our campaign was a highly unusual one. I'm one of 16 people that survived from the beginning of the campaign to the very end of the campaign. The reason for that is, in the summer of 2007, John had really supported the Iraq War and the surge. And he had also supported immigration reform, both of which were largely unpopular in the Republican Party, particularly with people who gave money to Republican presidential campaigns. And most of our money dried up, to the point where the campaign manager was resigned, most of the staff resigned, and folks gave our campaign up for dead. But Senator McCain wanted to hang in, and I had gone to work for him because I really believed in him as a person, believed that he would make the best choice for President of the United States, and so I decided to stay on with him. And a number of us worked for a couple of months without even taking a paycheck because we had no money. And so there were about 16 of us running a presidential campaign for probably 3 to 4 months or so. And Senator McCain muscled up, and the rest is sort of history, in the fact that we were able to win the Republican nomination for president after most pundits had written us off for dead. So I'll share a few of those experiences as we go through. And then along the campaign trail, I got to be friends with Rick Warren, who wrote the next most popular book to the Bible. Some people call it the Bible, unfortunately, but it's not. The Purpose-Driven Life. And I do PR work and communications and media work for him now as well. And now I'm with Steinreich, as Dr. Snell said, as a vice president opening a DC office for our firm. So my path has really taken a bunch of odd twists and turns, and the same will probably be true for you. In fact, a friend of mine does research in what's called emerging adulthood, and has found that between age 20 and 30, the average person now changes jobs 7 times. So your path may take, where you think you'll be and where you actually end up may be divergent. So be open to new experiences, no matter how big or small they might be. So if you have an interest in politics, go work and volunteer in a political campaign. If you have an interest in other things, the classics or whatever, keep pursuing those. But there are a number of rhetorical situations in which political candidates find themselves. And all of them, I was called upon to use the skill set that I had as a teacher of rhetoric in giving advice to Senator McCain about his communication. Not just in the written word, I did write speeches for Senator McCain, but also in the way that was expressed and how we even framed events. We thought very closely about where we would stand Senator McCain, what we would do for individual speaking events, even right down to the color of backdrops and the placement of different things during a speaking situation. So, for instance, in this situation, we had just landed someplace, I don't even remember where we were at this point, but this was during the fall campaign. The economy was a major factor, and so we wanted to give the appearance that we were constantly thinking about this, and that we would do it to the point of thinking about it as soon as we got off the airplane, not wait for a situation to give a speech with a teleprompter, or wait to frame a particular event, but to do it on the fly, so to speak. And so this is a press conference, but also a place where he delivered some prepared remarks on the economy, and we would do this quite frequently. So we think a lot about the rhetorical situation. Anybody familiar with a theorist by the name of Lloyd Bitzer? Bitzer is a communication theorist. He talks about communication situations in relationship to what he calls exigences, which are the reason people speak. Exigences are problems or opportunities that call into existence rhetoric. And so we think a lot about that in the political world. We think about when are occasions, when it's necessary to issue a statement or to deliver a speech or to do an event, or and how will that event be framed and how will it look? Let me give you an example of this. In the campaign in 2008, on the day, we got the nomination very early on. We had sewn up the nomination during the Texas-Ohio primaries, which were in March. However, Clinton and Obama fought it out because she would not concede. And they went deep into April. And so we were constantly trying to think of ways to keep attention on our race, because we ran the risk of the Clinton-Obama race sucking up all the media time and having us sort of be the afterthought, given that we had already won. So we decided on the day that Obama was supposed to win the nomination to do a major event in New Orleans where we would give a speech. We had a speech ready to go about sort of framing the race against Obama, inviting him to debate us, talking to the American public about what we thought the issue set was. And I thought the speech was very good. I actually did not write that speech. Mark Salter, McCain's sort of chief book writer, wrote the speech. But we had thought about very carefully how we framed that speech, and we decided to give it in New Orleans because it was one of the places of the prior administration's greatest failures. And we wanted to show that we'd be different. So we had a great spot, we had a great speech, but the event was largely a disaster for a couple of reasons. First reason was the aesthetic, the look of the speech. Senator McCain stood in front of a Kelly green background, which looked like it was a green screen. So you kept waiting for the weather to appear behind it, and he looked really bad because he's fair-skinned, and against a Kelly green background, it makes him look even fairer, and it made him look old. And so the person who actually chose that backdrop got fired. On top of that, we made a mistake about the timing of that speech. We thought if we give it at the same time that Obama is giving his speech, we'll distract him, suck up some of the media. That was a terrible mistake, because the media covered Obama's speech and not ours, by and large. That speech is pretty much forgotten, part of the political campaign. So we had a good speech, we had a great message. We had the right person to deliver that speech, but we messed up the exegesis, we messed up the timing, and we messed up part of the communicative aspect of the speech, the look. So we think a lot about all of these things comprehensively. That instance, it didn't appear as though we did, but campaigns do think about these things as they approach events. And so, that's a dimension where the academic sort of crosses into the political, because we're called into question to think about some of the things that are in the theoretical world, to put them into practice. And there are a number of situations that occurred along the trail like that, where we think about how we'll frame specific events. One of the more silly ones that occurred was we were out in California at a place that builds solar panels, where Governor Schwarzenegger endorsed us for president. And the prior day, Rudy Giuliani had endorsed us. So we had both of them there to give an endorsement of Senator McCain. And we had placed a backdrop behind the senator, but whoever kind of figured out what size it should be had made it too tall. So the banner, you could only read like the bottom half of it, and the pole holding the bottom of the banner ran right through the center of McCain's head. So in the camera shot, you could see like the bottom of some words and a pole going through Senator McCain's head. So, you've got to think about how things actually get framed, because candidates think about this all the time. It's no mistake that Obama gave his announcement speech in Springfield, Illinois, in Lincoln's, basically place. So people think about framing these issues quite frequently. And my area of expertise, the reason I was brought onto the campaign, was to prepare Senator McCain for debates. This is actually happens to be a gubernatorial debate that we were prepping for the Virginia race back in 2005, where we do extensive practice sessions, just like I would do with an academic debate team, or you would do if you were preparing to deliver a message. We do extensive debates practice sessions. Let me sort of clear up some myths about academic debate. First of all, everybody thinks academic debate is a fabric of the American political system. Can anybody tell me when the first intra-party presidential debates were held? So you didn't know you'd have to actually answer questions of the speaker.
The only one that I really know of is the Lincoln Douglas next, right?
Lincoln Douglas were not presidential debates.
Oh, that was that right? That's right.
They were debates for Senate.
And then they ran for president.
Does anybody know? Want to venture a guess? They also happen to be, I'll give you a clue, they also happen to be the first televised presidential debates. Now, that should jog somebody. Come on, take a risk.
Nixon Kennedy.
What's that?
Nixon Kennedy.
That's correct. Nixon Kennedy. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Stone. So, yeah, the very first presidential inter-party debates were between Nixon and Kennedy back in 1960. Now, obviously that's, for you guys, like you think, oh my gosh, that's like, mine will be in the day of Aristotle and Plato. But that's only 4 years before I was born. And so not that awful long ago. Before that, there were never presidential debates. The other thing is, there's a myth that debates are actually debates. Political debates aren't really debates. We look at them as messaging opportunities. They're another place where we can get an affirmative message about the candidate out into the public domain, but have it done in a neutral atmosphere. So it doesn't look like a campaign event. It doesn't look like something we've controlled. And we can do it in comparison to the other candidate in the race, so that we can say, hey, look, we are better than our opposition. So debates are actually a very useful campaign device that we think pretty carefully about. The other set of folks that think a lot about it are the media. They think about how to frame it. They're really interested in who won or lost the debate, which, from an academic point of view, ought to just make you itch, because to talk about winning and losing a political debate is not what you would think in its purest form a political debate should be about. It should be about talking about ideas and who is going to do what policy-wise, not who wins or loses based on who laid on the platform or whose side, or who looked like they were unshaven, or who made a big gaffe, or who wasn't John Kennedy. or all of those sorts of things, right? You get that reference? The most devastating moment in the presidential debate was actually the vice presidential debate. In 1988, when Dan Quayle tried to compare himself to John Kennedy, and then Lloyd Bentsen looked over at him and said, you know, I knew John Kennedy and you're no John Kennedy, and the whole place just, you know, went, oh. And, you know, Dan Quayle tried to spell potato, and the rest is tomato. But anyway. So we think a lot about these as messaging opportunities, not in the strictest sense of the word, debates. For example, in the vice presidential debate this last cycle with Governor Palin, we really wanted her to very much have a small range of issue sets to deal with in the debate. So we taught her about 20 answers, and then taught her ways to pivot back to those answers off of any question, and then wanted to frame her image in the debate. Because you have Joe Biden, who's kind of stuffy, you know, rigid, not someone you think is incredibly personable, prone to being, you know, big mouth, rough. And you have Sarah Palin, at that point, who was largely unknown quantity. So what we wanted to do is make her look, you know, more personable, more inviting, more open than Joe Biden. So what do? We have her. Does anybody remember what happened at the front end of that debate? What's that? Exactly. She walks up to him with a live microphone, which was worn on the lapels. We knew it would be live. And she walks up, and during the opening handshake, she says, "Can I call you Joe?" And immediately everybody thinks, you know, this is a nice person. Look at that. You know? And so everybody's looking over here instead of worrying about if Africa's a country or a continent. At any rate, so debates are really, we look at them as affirmative messaging opportunities. Now, a lot of candidates look at them as though they're taking the SAT, which is, oh my goodness, I have to know how to answer every question. And in training them, we talk about how it's really a place for you to control the exigence. So we think about it communicatively, because really, you know, communication situations are about opportunities. You know, lots of times you may be called to address one specific thing, but you really have something that you want to say, and so you find a way to take that opportunity to say what you want to say and make it fit the exigence. That happens, you do it all the time. When you talk with friends, when you are in class, sometimes you get assigned a paper. I remember a certain student of mine was assigned to give a persuasive speech, and it was supposed to be on a specific topic, and that particular student wanted to show and demonstrate that they could think outside the box, and so they gave a speech that was sort of outside the topic on a certain dictator tyrant from the 1940s named Adolf Hitler. And you know, the speech went over like a lead balloon, kind of. But at any rate, I won't tell you who that is. So, but we do this all the time. We try to, and I'm not trying to embarrass him. He was a great student. But we do try to make our communication fit situations a lot of times, and no less the same in politics. We even think about the format. This is the set for the town hall debate in the presidential cycle. It was used, this past cycle was used during the Bush debates as well. And you know, when you see it on television, what you think you're looking at is a sort of small set where there's about 150 people who are asking the candidates questions. But in reality, what you're looking at is a fishbowl, because there's that small set, and then outside of them is an audience of thousands sitting around sort of watching that fishbowl. And we even think about how to get the audience. Both campaigns hired pollsters who came up with a very scientific method of screening who would be in the audience. And we actually screened over 5,000 people before we finally got down to 150 that both sides would agree on. It was like choosing a jury, basically, but only a lot more rigid. It took about 3 weeks to screen all the individuals to choose the audience. So we think about formats and how we approach them. We even think about how we're going to time these things called debates. One of the things I was charged with as during debate prep for both Bush and McCain was negotiating the rules for the debates. And in both instances, we had rules in the Bush debates. The rule book was 32 pages long. In McCain Obama debates, the rule book was a little bit less. I think it was around 28 pages, but it spelled out who would come out on the stage first, who would lead first, what green rooms would go to who would speak first, who would speak last, how the debates would be timed, all of those sorts of things. And so we even think about very specifically timing lights. Will there be a bell? Will there not be a bell? What can the moderator do? For example, during this time, during this cycle's town hall debate, I spent the entire time on the phone yelling at the ABC producer who produces the debates for the networks, because Tom Brokaw, who moderated the debate, was ignoring the audience and asking his own questions. And I kept yelling and saying, hey, this is supposed to be a town hall debate where the people get to ask the questions, not Tom Brokaw. So, and during debates, we have what's called a war room. This is a war room for a gubernatorial debate. And what we do in the war room is issue real-time responses to everything that happens in the debates. So, for instance, if a candidate attacks your candidate on a particular issue, we'll put out a press release correcting the attack. Or if we want to launch a program, for example, in the second presidential debate, we had McCain launch what we titled the Lexington Project. It was about energy policy. And during the debate, when he mentioned it, we were all queued up to put out about a 40-page document that detailed the proposal of the Lexington Project. So we have a war room in which we monitor constantly, not just during debates, but during the entire campaign, to rapidly respond, because rhetoric has moved into light speed. The news cycle moves very, very quickly. There's constant communication, and there is more time to fill than there was even 10 or 20 years ago. And so there's constant coverage of these things, and you have to be able to respond rapidly, because a story can grow instantaneously. And most of the time, when candidates get into trouble, it's because they fail to respond to particular stories. I'll give you an example of a successful response. During our campaign, right before the New Hampshire primary, the New York Times, without sources, ran a story on the front page accusing Senator McCain of having an affair with a lobbyist. We knew that the story was in the works, and so for weeks we prepared exactly what we would do on the day that the story was launched. One of which was to discredit the source, the New York Times. So as soon as that story was launched, we had a campaign ready to go to counter the story. And a campaign has to be ready to do that and effectively put the story to bed. But then there are other stories which grow legs. For example, I would argue that the Obama campaign didn't really handle the Reverend Wright story very effectively. Now, in the end, it did do some damage to him, but it didn't end up costing him the presidency, but it did do some damage to his candidacy along the way. So campaigns handle these things poorly and good, and you have to frame them with the media. One of the things that we try to do is control media spin. This is Larry Sabato, who is at UVA. He runs a thing called the Crystal Ball that makes, for the most part, inaccurate predictions about races, political races, but still gets a lot of money and has a good job at UVA. This is a media spin room at a presidential debate. All the W's represent our spinners. All the Carrie Edwards signs represent spinners for the other campaign. And everything in between there are media. And what we're trying to do is convince the media that our take of the debate is right, and the other side is trying to do the same thing. So there's actually a place where we try to control what the media will say about an event. So we try to control media filter. Then campaigns will frequently even bring in celebrities to control spin in debates. For instance, in the 2004 debates, one of the big issues was stem cell research. And so the Kerry campaign brought Michael J. Fox to the debates so that he could offer his take on stem cell research and have folks be sympathetic, given that he has severe Parkinson's. But we won, so that was kind of sweet. But at any rate, this is election night. I was just kind of, Campaigns go through phases. You're getting ready to enter a political race. And most of you now are to the point where you'll start paying more and more attention, and you're in an area where you have the ability to pay attention because a lot of the races are in high focus up in the Northeast. This is the day of our announcement. So sort of the first phase of a campaign is the announcement phase. Very, very, very important. We announced, this is Portsmouth, New Hampshire. We announced in Portsmouth, New Hampshire because that's the site of McCain's greatest victory when he ran for president in 2000. He beat Bush, and then Bush came back and beat us in South Carolina and went on to win the nomination. And so New Hampshire we viewed as an important state. As I talked about already, President Obama gave his announcement speech in Springfield, Illinois, also sort of framing an important moment in the political campaign. So the announcement phase is very, very important because it's where a candidate sort of sets forward the ideas on which he will campaign. In April of 2007, we set forth those issues, and Senator McCain framed them and didn't divert from them. They cost us support for a while, but when the surge worked, the immigration issue died down, we were eventually able to win the nomination. And then you go through the debate stage. We actually did 18 primary debates during the primary process. So before we won the nomination, we did 18 debates, starting in May of 2007. That means that the first Republican primary debate you'll see this coming May. So before this academic year is out, the first debate will occur for the 2012 cycle. So the presidential cycle has gotten incredibly long. The race really began for the 2012 presidency, began on November 3rd, day after the midterm elections. And when we started, there were 10 candidates. We added a couple, dropped a few, and got down to one. One of the things that we made a hallmark of our campaign was the town hall meeting. Once our campaign melted down, we decided that we were going to stake everything in New Hampshire. John couldn't win Iowa because he hates agriculture subsidies, and the people of Iowa love them. In fact, little known fact is that of the 50 states in the Union, Iowa enjoys more federal subsidies per capita than any other state. $4,000 for every man, woman, and child in the state of Iowa. So, and McCain hates those, and he would say that, in spite of our attempts to not get him to. And so the people of Iowa did not really welcome Senator McCain too often. So we decided we were going to win New Hampshire. So we did 100 town hall meetings between September of 07 and January of 08 in an attempt to win New Hampshire. We did successfully. The town hall meeting is sort of a lost art. It's the old-fashioned stump, which is really part of the great agrarian tradition of presidential politics, the sort of populist tradition that runs through the root of the American political history. And if you haven't really studied any of that, you should do it. It's great context for you. It's part of, in my opinion, being culturally literate to sort of understand the roots of how we do things the way we do today and where they came from and how they've evolved. Studying like William Jennings Bryan and some of those folks and seeing how they used the stump and the populist themes that ran through them will explain a lot of where we are today with the Tea Party movement and some of the other things that are happening on the political landscape right now. And this was the night we won the primary. This was in the hotel room when we won the nomination in Texas. It was quite a good feeling of satisfaction. Cindy was a great campaigner for us. This is another one of the town halls. Quite frequently, most people think when you're working with a political candidate, they must be totally confident. You never have to, how do they take advice and, all of those things. But unbelievably, they suffer from the same insecurities that you do when you speak in front of public. I mean, public speaking, by the way, is the #1 fear in America, the fear of public speaking. And political candidates suffer from this as much as everyday people. And so one of the things that McCain would insist on is that I and Lindsey Graham, who's right next to me, senator from South Carolina, sit in the audience during the debate and smile, so that we would reassure him that he was doing okay during the debate. And if there was a break in the debate, he insisted we'd come to the stage and just say, you know, how are you doing? How are you doing great? You know, I mean, you're not going to tell a guy in the middle of the game, hey, you really stink. We wait till after to do that. But at any rate, this was one of those coaching moments in the middle of a debate. This was in Detroit. And then you get to meet some interesting people along the way, too, in a presidential campaign. One of the interesting stories that happened is a online news source called WorldNetDaily. Are you familiar with that? I will express my frustration with them. They ran a story because someone had called someone in our campaign and said, have you met with Billy Graham? And the person on the end of the phone apparently said, no, we're not going to meet with him right now or something. And so they printed the story, McCain refuses to meet with Billy Graham. So what do? Well, we reacted quickly. I actually called, I know Franklin's PR person, I called him and said, hey, we'd love to meet with Billy Graham anytime, tell us when. Hopefully it'll be this weekend. And it was, and so we went down and met Billy Graham, and Franklin was there as well. So that was an incredibly meaningful experience to me. This is inside the airplane, there's stand-up John for the press. That way they could always feel like they had John McCain right there with them. Our airplane was divided into two sections. The front section was for staff, the back section was for press. Now, let me tell you this. 75% of what you read about presidential campaigns is false. It's not true. Now, it's not always the press's fault that it's false, but it's false. Here's the reason why it's false. The press, by and large, aren't there when we make decisions and do things. We don't say, hey, ABC, why don't you come tell us what you think, you know, right? Or would you like to watch us make this decision and hear all the things we're going to say and then, you know, go give them to our opponent? The press aren't there when we make these critical decisions. So they get their story from a variety of sources, and guess what? Those sources are personally interested. They are personally interested in making money. And so they want to make themselves look good and make everybody think they had all the good ideas and all the bad ideas were the candidate's fault. So they tell stories from a perspective. And on top of that, the media lets them do it off the record or on background. So they don't have to take account for the things that they say. And then they go and print it. There were tons of things that the media got wrong through the campaign about things that happened on the campaign, things that were false, things that just aren't true. But because they ride with you in the plane, they think they're getting it all. When in reality, they're getting really very little of it. You get to meet some interesting animals too. I thought I'd just show this because it's kind of fun. John loved this. We went to, even though Iowa didn't like him, he liked going to the Iowa State Fair. And because they always had this big fat pig, this was Big Red, and so John would go see the pig, and then he'd go out and say, yeah, I was just in Iowa, I saw more pork. There's more pork in Washington at the Iowa State Fair, and blah, 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 blah. You know, he'd tell corny jokes about it. But at any rate, and he loved, and who doesn't, by the way, love pork chop on a stick. So that was one of his favorites. I'm joking. This was a high point, I believe, in our campaign. This was at the Civil Forum. It was pre-convention. It was the first joint forum that we did with Obama. And I believe that night we actually got the best of Obama at the Civil Forum with Rick Warren. Obama went first, we went second, and it was the first joint appearance between the candidates. We also, this was coming into the convention. We also spent a lot of time just sort of talking through different events on a constant basis, and so they're constantly looking for input and feedback on different situations. This is getting ready for the convention speech. One of the cool things that we did was John has a nice ranch. The house isn't elaborate, but he's got a lot of land in Sedona, Arizona. And we needed a place to practice the convention speech. But we didn't want people to see us or know what we were doing. So John's like, hey, I got this big yard in Sedona. You guys, we'll practice there. So we went and built this humongous tent on their property, which made Cindy very unhappy. But we built, the runway and the whole 9 yards so we could practice, like a beauty queen, how he would walk down the runway, how he would stage the speech, and actually practice rehearsing it. And I think the convention speech by and large was a home run for John. He did a good job. This was the night of the speech. And then when we practiced for debates, we actually did them like they were going to be live. So we set up for the town hall, we set up the set just like it would look. We had an audience that would sit there and ask questions. We did everything as though it were a live situation. And that's a good thing for you too, when you're writing, speaking, or whatever. You should treat everything like it's live. For most of you, you think Obama actually got soundly defeated in the midterms, but I'm here to tell you that Obama actually won an election in Ohio this past November 2nd. Rob Portman, who is pictured here, was our Barack Obama during the debate prep sessions. And he was also John Kerry in 2004. He's now Senator, will be Senator Portman, but he was a U.S. Trade Representative, and he was a very good stand-in for the opposition. Did a good job. And we do walkthroughs. This was the walkthrough for Palin's debate. You can notice here that we even thought about what she might wear and how it would look against the background to make, to give her a good look during the debate. So we actually think about even what they're wearing. In fact, I have a collection of John McCain ties at my house because McCain had all these ratty ties, and I would keep insisting that he not wear them. And then right before a debate, I could always count on the fact that he was going to wear a ratty tie, so I'd find a tie that would match his suit, and then I'd trade with him before the debate and make him wear my tie. So anyway, this was what I think is one of the kind of cooler pictures. One of the things that I will tell you, as a piece of advice, is this: you ever have in classes, in whatever you're doing, be intellectually curious. One of the mistakes I think students make is they pay a lot of money for education, and then college is like one of the few places where you're happy if you get less for what you pay. And students make the mistake of not being intellectually curious. One of the greatest things that I took as an opportunity was when our campaign melted down, I became the bag boy, the speechwriter, the teleprompter operator, the driver, the coffee getter, everything. I kind of had all those roles because I was traveling with John by myself. But that was also an opportunity for me to learn from him and his experiences. And always take advantage of that. Be intellectually curious of your professors, of people around you, because one of the great things about Senator McCain is even at the age of 70, which he was when he ran for president, he was always a very intellectually curious person. He was always learning. And this actually happens to be the window through which Martin Luther King was assassinated. We were the only presidential candidate to go to the commemoration of that in April of 2008, deliver a speech, lay a wreath. But we toured the museum, which is across from the hotel, prior to the speech, and we went through the museum. And this is the senator kind of looking through that window, which I thought to be a kind of a cool moment in the election. So, what about political rhetorical skills? What are some takeaways that I can give you if I bring this back to academics for a second? The first is be well read. It's exciting to me to hear that your program is steeped in understanding the classics. For example, one of the principles of Aristotelian rhetoric is the enthemy. In fact, he calls it the heart of rhetoric. It's a rhetorical syllogism. And enthymematic thinking is still, I think, very applicable today. And I still use it when I coach political candidates. And if you don't know what the enthemy is, go out and read the rhetoric and you'll find out. So I'm not going to tell you right now. But be well read, in and out of your discipline. One of the kind of the greatest pieces of advice a professor gave me was read 30 pages of something intellectual every day. You know, if you don't do anything else, read 30 pages of something that challenges your mind every day. It'll help you be a good writer, help you expand your horizons, so be well read. Know how to write. That's the second thing. It's unbelievable to me how few students actually know how to construct complete sentences. Know how to write. If you know how to write, you will set yourself apart when you're looking for jobs. I just actually hired someone to be an account coordinator in the office that I'm opening, and I actually got 70 resumes for the position in the space of a day because the job market's highly competitive. I interviewed about 13 people. I ended up not hiring a person with extensive background in public relations. I ended up hiring an English major. The reason for that? She could write. She could actually write very well, which is something a person in PR has to do. And so I ended up hiring somebody that I thought to be pretty well read. Know how to research. Google is not the end of research. There's libraries and other databases and other things. And if you know how to use research tools, you'll be ahead of the game. If you get into media relations, you get with relationships. But this is true of things in the discipline generally speaking. Learn how to develop relationships and make sure that you're not just sort of using folks. And then I'll run here real fast. Messaging and branding are central. Know how to develop messages. Know how important branding is in whatever in some of your pursuits. And I talked about the enthemy. And then bring a unique rhetorical perspective. If you find yourself working in a communications perspective, in a communications field, use your training. Don't let loose and just become kind of another strategist. So my challenge for you is to kind of figure out what's your brand. What is it that identifies you as a person? That's under construction. And what's your message? And use that as you go forward.